We're recorded.
Okay. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 27th Audit Committee meeting. It's 8:30 a.m. and in front of you, you all have an agenda for today's meeting. First, I'd like to start by thanking all the new members of the Audit Committee for agreeing to participate and help the town in this very important role. So, you know, for those of you online who don't know or who are here today, we have Tony Cece, Janet Lanaway, who is coming back to help us on the Audit Committee. So thank you very much. And Mary Code.
That's okay. Yes.
I'm like, I always do this wrong. Who was a former Board of Finance member and now coming back to help us in this way. So thank you all. The first item on the agenda, which is the only thing I will be participating in, is for asking for the nomination for the office of chair of the Audit Committee. Do I have a nomination?
I will so nominate. Yep.
Janet, do I have any other nominations for the office of chair? Seeing none, all those in favor of Robin Fryer as chair of the Audit Committee, please signify by raising your hand. Robin, you can vote for yourself. Thank you. And now, if I could get a nomination for the office of secretary. Any nominations for the office of secretary?
I will nominate Mary.
Mary, thank you. Do I have any other nominations for the office of chair, secretary? Seeing none, I would like to call a vote for Mary for the office of secretary. All those in favor?
Oh, sure.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I will now move and allow Robin to take his seat as chair of the Audit Committee. Thank you all again.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Deanna, for handling that part of the meeting. And I would like to, as the one continuing member from last year's audit committee, extend my thanks as well to Mary and Janet and Tony for stepping up and serving the town in this way by agreeing to join the audit committee. And thank you in particular, Mary, for taking on the role of secretary. Might just take a moment, because I don't know if the three of you are familiar with everyone who's in attendance and in the room. You've got Anne Kelly Lentz, who is the CFO in the front row there. And on her right is Josh, the budget manager, budget director, sorry, whatever the title, and Diane Wilson, who's the controller. And in the second row, you've got Dr. Brian Lutzy, the superintendent of schools, and you've got Sean O'Keefe, who's the CFO for the school district. And on the screen, he's now come to life, is our treasurer, Andrew Brooks. Thank you, Andrew. We'll get to the bonding and that kind of thing a little later. So thank you very much for joining us. So the first order of business is to approve the minutes from December, and they have been distributed and they are on the town website. The December meeting essentially was to meet with the auditors and discuss the ACFR, our financial report package. And there were one or two outstanding items, as you would have seen, and there was a dedicated to a subcommittee being Chuck Jacobson and myself to resolve those, which we did on the 7th of December. So there's two sets of minutes. The second one is quite brief. Do any of you have any questions before I put them to a vote? Okay, so I suggest that as the only one of the four of us who was at the meeting, and having reviewed the draft, given my changes to Chuck has made the changes and everyone else's changes, posted them on the website. I think they're ready to approve personally. So I make a motion to approve those minutes for December 1st and December 7th. Would anyone care to second that? I'm sorry, the agenda only had the first. And thanks to the ever alert Chuck Jacobson, who was online and saw the agenda and said, you forgot to put the 7th there, which I did forget to do. So do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Janet. So all in favor of approving the minutes? Okay, that is unanimous. Okay. The next item on our agenda, as it always is at what is typically the April meeting, we're a few days early this month, might have something to do with tax season.
Which I appreciate.
No problem. Is to just get a brief overview of the budget process, where we are in the timeline, where we are with the budget and how it compares with last year, the mill rate, and capital expenditure budget. And then we should also talk about, bonding plans. And Deanna, as you're obviously welcome, you don't have to come up, but please feel free to participate in the discussion, because the first selectman's office and the board of selectmen have an awful lot of input into the budget process. So, and
No.
Sure. Yeah.
and I leave it to all of you as to who leads off the discussion.
Sure. Josh Kaufman, budget manager.
Yep.
So you should have a copy. This is kind of the two summary sheets, the expenditure and revenue side. Do you want me to kind of talk about how we got to where we are now, or just kind of give you a highlight of where we are at the moment?
If it's no more than 2 or 3 minutes, a lot the description of the journey, then
Sure. So in November, we kind of pulled the departments for what their budgets are going to be. And I worked with them to put it into one cohesive document. In December, we worked with First Selectman and myself, Tucker, and Cheryl at HR to kind of go line by line with each department and gain an understanding of what really goes into each department's budgets. During that process, we cut about 400,000 or so from the operating side, from the town's expenditures.
you took 400,000.
Yeah. In January, I went to the Board of Selectmen. During that process, obviously, they kind of gain a better understanding of what their operational goals are for the next year. We integrate in the Board of Ed's budget into our own. During that process, they shaved about 1.3 million from the operating, and about 720,000 from the capital side of things. In February, then it went to the Board of Finance, and they took about 3 million off the operating, and 9 million off the capital side. And that
Sorry, how
brings,
much on the operating?
about 2.9, and 9 million on capital. And now we are in the midst of the town council review. That is having its public hearing tomorrow, and its vote is on the 2nd. before we go back into bond authorizations in the following weeks, and then a mill rates decision by the Board of Finance in either May or early June. In terms of highlights, right now we're at about 5.2% increase on expenditures. There's about 23 million in capital expenditures, 5 million.
Sorry, just repeat that number.
23 million on
I
capital.
know it's here, so you,
What was that?
no, it's fine.
Um,
23.
5 million on the sewer side of things, 20 million to be bonded, 384,000 tax supported, and 6.6 million on the other category, either by grants, fund balances, or donations. Right now, we have a expected anticipated amount to be raised by taxation increase of 6%, so about $9 million to 159 million. But of course, that changes as the mill rate is decided on by the Board of Finance, and they decide how much to be drawn down on the fund balance. I think that's kind of a brief overview. I don't know if the Board of Ed wants to chime in on their separate process and how they lead up to January.
Yeah, please.
I'll talk briefly of the process as Sean gives out to the current snapshot of where
Budget,
we are.
and this is for later on the agenda.
Which we do share electronically with the financials. I don't know if you're receiving the audit committee mailing list,
Yeah.
so did you have the
Yeah, we got
the
this.
February? Oh, good, so everyone should have, good.
Yeah.
So for our process, we begin really in October. As we develop our budget, as you know, we have our 5 schools and multiple programs in different locations and things. And so we really work hard to make sure that folks feel connected to the work that we're doing as we're building the budget. So we start in October, meetings at the buildings. We set a direction for folks using our district goals that we have that turn into budget assumptions and related priorities. Then we talk to our department chairs who talk to their teachers, and then we go back to the department chairs and others, the program leaders, in order to find out what their needs are, what's working, what's not. And we sort of work through October and November, which culminates in a couple of days of meetings with each of the program leaders where we put everything together and then make some hard decisions in order to prepare for the budget workshop that comes up with the Board of Education in December, second Monday of December, typically. At that workshop, we are talking about ideas and concepts and programs, things we're not in the numbers quite yet at that point. We take our direction then from the Board of Education and go forward from there into developing the budget document, which is presented the first Monday of January on our return from the break. That at that point is the superintendent's budget proposal. Then the Board of Education uses January to continue to review and suggest and make some changes as we go through. The end of January, it becomes the Board of Education's proposed budget. So it shifts from ownership by the superintendent district to joint ownership with the Board of Education. At that point, typically the next day or two, we bring it to the Board of Selectmen, where we share it with the Selectmen team and go into some detail about the budget. But what we really focus on with the Board of Selectmen is capital, because that's their entry point into that. So we have discussions around capital. We do share the operating information as well. When we came in, and then we go to the Board of Finance after that, and they typically have February that they work with it, and it's March, so we're with the town council now. Public hearing tomorrow night, and then the ultimate budget vote, I believe, is a week from tomorrow. For the town council, and then we have our appropriation and we begin to plan. We go back to the Board of Education then for any adjustments that have happened along the way and we look to have that resolved typically by June so that we can build that budget and start to move it over to Munis into the correct accounts so we can start to expense and take it from there. The numbers themselves as we've run forward, really our budget is driven. This year's increase is significantly driven by our internal services fund. The experience in our insurance has been positive through the years. We've really benefited from having an internal services fund and being self-insured. But what comes with that is some of the volatility that you have to absorb, especially with some high dollar claimants. We do have some risk inherent in our plan around the size of the individual stop loss. That's $300,000 and some other pieces that decisions that have been made that have served us well, but when there's volatility, there will be increased cost on some of those things. So the most significant driver of our budget is that. And then of course, salaries are the next largest. Salaries and benefits together are 82% of our budget. If you put in the other sort of largest drivers, which are transportation, utilities, out of district placements, you get to about 92% of the budget. So a lot of the budget conversations as we get into is really playing around the margins. And as people know, we really work very hard to manage those operational costs as best we can, so that with the numbers in that 92%, because that's really where you can drive some change. So we've worked when we're going into negotiations again this summer with our teachers, things like that, but with energy costs, transportation costs, and others to drive those things down. But so right now, so we started at about 6.5 or so, 659. We have through conversations with the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, others, we're now at a 6.1. That is due to some increased turnover savings that we didn't anticipate early, but we have more retirements in hand than we did earlier, obviously. So we're able to take some turnover savings there. We're also, while we're not necessarily improving in our experience with healthcare, we're not getting worse either. So we're about where we projected for this most recent month. So with that and with the rolling off another month in trend, we're able to bring that down a little bit in our projection too. So we're at 6.17%.
Yep.
Again, and you can see it right there on that top page.
So what you have, the top page is just the bridge from the Board of Ed requested to where we currently are with the Board of Finance approved. We started at $109.8 million total operating expense, which includes $17.8 million in ISF and 92 even for other operating. 6.59%. As Brian mentioned, we were requested to reduce by 500,000, which we complied with. Took 250 out of other operating expense, mainly related to higher than expected retirees, so turnover savings. And then on the ISF line, taking a potential risk, we're not there yet, but we felt that it was appropriate to reduce the other 250 out of the ISF. So that brings us to 109.4, which yields a year-to-year increase of 6.356 million or 6.17%.
Can I just ask a question? How, and forgive my ignorance, because it's been a few years since I've been on this committee. How often do you renegotiate with the unions? And how many unions are you having to negotiate with?
Typically, the contracts are 3 to 4 years in length.
Mhm.
Depending on that specific contract, usually one of the things that's decided during the contract negotiations, how long do we want this particular contract to go for? But it's typically 3 to 4 years.
Mhm. And we have 6
6 unions?
unions that we work with, and they're all on cycle. And it's a different process when we have our certified negotiations than non-certified. And we can go down a rabbit hole on it, but long.
Yeah, no,
short is-
just to get an idea, because that's obviously the biggest number.
Yeah, and this is our teachers, so that's the biggest one. So we've got our teachers, we have our administrators who will come next year, so we do that intentionally on that cycle, so we one to the other. The others, because the way that the act works around teachers, we're on a very tight timeline, so it will be resolved by December of here. It must be. The others are more, they're municipal employee relations act, so sometimes those can sort of run over into other years.
The second chart I just threw in there, just to give you an idea of the makeup of our budget. With this, it's a busy chart, but what it says is that if you look at total Big Four, which is comprised of salaries, benefits, out of district tuition, and transportation, those are the big hitters. That makes up $100 million of the budget, of that $109 million budget. So about 92% of the budget is purely based on salaries, benefits, out of district tuition, which we are obligated to do, and transportation, which, by the way, we have a 5-year contract at 2% per year, which is a phenomenal agreement. Phenomenal.
Where are we which year in the?
We're in year
contract?
2 right now. And I came from Greenwich, where we were looking at, they actually did sign a contract. We had 2 bidders, the incumbent, which bid a 24% increase, and then a newcomer at 12 point something percent. And the reason for such a huge increase was because in the second year of a 5-year contract with STA, the incumbent, they signed an agreement with the unions, giving them significant amount of salary and benefit increases. So we have to pay the piper at the end of it. So it's unfortunate.
Mm.
So it's 92, those four are 92% of the budget itself and 98% of the year-to-year growth. So of that $6 million of year-to-year growth, those four represent 98% of that growth. And then everything else is growing at 2%, about 2.3%, which is, about 8% of the budget. So just to give you an idea of what our makeup is, and that all other is not discretionary by any means. It includes legal expense, students, teacher supplies and so on. It's urgent. And then the last chart is just where we are on capital. So we did reduce our capital request by 630,000 in two areas. Public address systems in Saxon at the high school. So that's where we are. We started out we requested 4.85 million and we're down to 4.2. That's a quick summary. I just did for.
Question, so the 630, that's done, is this really just pushing them out to another year rather than not spending the money? It's just not spending it this year, or you're just not gonna?
Correct.
I didn't look
So-
at what they are. But
Yeah.
I mean,
So it is, it's a replacement of the PA systems, and
Okay.
upon conversation with the Board of Selectmen and internally, we made the decision to defer it for a year, so it's not removed, but it's really to give us some time to talk with some partners that might be able to turn that investment into an instructional improvement for kids as well. So if we're going to make this kind of an investment, we want to make sure that we're making the right one.
right.
It's significant money, and there's research that continues to come out, and there are some districts that have done this with great success, where increasing and improving the sound quality in a classroom also has a positive impact on the children and the students that are learning there, definitely for middle school and high school. And those are the two buildings we're looking at. So we're seeing if the PA system can also have a positive impact on classroom instruction.
Any questions for Board of Ed?
How do we arrive at these calculations? I mean, being new,
Hmm.
do we go out to bid,
For the capital.
for the capital?
To the
expenditures?
capital, they're primarily driven by, what we've done in the past. We do go out to vendors and get estimates to the extent that they will comply with it. Sometimes, the vendors ask if you have budget for this, and if you say, not yet, we don't have access, don't have an approved budget, they're a little reluctant to go through, a huge task of coming up with a precise estimate. But we do use estimates based on history, and we do go out to vendors and do ask for an estimate of all these things.
How many vendors do we go to normally?
Quite especially the big ticket items, like, for example, we have STV vans for the special ed vans. And we purchase it through Carl Chevrolet in a state contract, and we do get a fairly precise estimate. That's one example.
But then before you actually go to buy them, you would get sort of three estimates, would you? Is that what you normally do?
We would get, we get an estimate from them as a state
Right,
contract.
but before you actually went and actually purchased anything or
Sure.
built anything, you would get competitive quotes?
Typically, yes.
If it's on the state contract.
Yeah.
Then we just use the state contract number, because the state has done the bidding for you, and that has all been vetted, so that provides you the best lowest cost. So if it's on the state contract, there's typically not a bidding process. If it's not, then we do, and it certainly has to do with the size of the project. The other thing, we also have architects that come through periodically every couple of years, 5, 10, and we'll do a review of our facility, and they will estimate prices in that. So we can also use that document to build our budget as we go forward. The difference with our capital budget versus our operating is the capital budget, essentially the money is always on the town side, so we'll draw down from that. But then when the project is closed, and if there's any money remaining, that money moves, stays with the town. Where the Board of Ed is an appropriation for our operating, that is Board of Education's, management throughout the course of the year. And then at the close of the year, there's no balance carried, and that would roll over. But it's managed a little bit differently on the capital side than it is on the operating side.
Okay, I understand the state, but I guess look, I don't know what the bylaws of the town are in regard to how many estimates are we need as far as when we go out to bid.
Sure.
I just want to, do we follow those guidelines?
Absolutely.
We do.
To-
So
Okay.
if it's, I think it's over $5,000, we go out and get 3 estimates.
Okay,
If it's over 15,000, we go out to bid.
Mhm.
Well,
Okay.
that's
And do you
generally-
have any idea how often the state does their competitive bidding process? Like if you get on to the
it's
state,
annually.
it's annually.
Annually.
Okay.
And the town has their purchasing policy as well that we follow, that once we go out to, once we have the approval to spend the funds, then we go through our process of the same different levels of whether you get a quote, whether you get a bid, you have to go out for bid, or you can go on, you can actually not only go on the state bid, if another town has bid the same exact truck that you want, you can go off that bid. So if you have another entity like that that has done that, you can go off those bids, so long as they're current.
Are the guidelines the same as the dollar amounts in terms of when?
Our
the
purchasing
5,000
policies are different.
are different?
Yeah.
And what I'm finding, they're different, obviously by town. And
Mm.
ours are, I would tell you, much more restrictive
Are they?
than other towns, like going out to bid in some districts, $50,000.
Well, that's the town.
It's like a copy of the
we'll
purchasing
get the
policies
That
for
would
both
be
the
useful.
s-
yes, that would be
the
great.
town
Thank
and
you.
the-
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think we
We'll get
can-
that out to
Okay,
you.
good. Distribute to all of us. Yeah. Further questions on the Board of Ed? Thank you for that. Yeah, I know you've been through the process of building a budget through on the Board of Ed side many times. I guess it's the first time doing it from a different angle, so anything you want to add to what Josh and Dawn said in terms of how it went? And I mean,
So-
we know where we are. but
Yeah,
what
no,
happens
I
next,
mean,
yeah.
because I was brand new, I came in at the end of November. And so a lot of the budgets for the individual departments had been built, but I had the good fortune to be able to go through the meetings with every department head, and because I was new, asked to go through every line item in every budget to understand sort of, just because I didn't understand what everything was about. So I think it was a good process, and I think we'll continue that process at least on the town side. Just because I think it's a good exercise for the departments heads to really understand what's in their budget and what sort of the issues are from a taxpayer and a town perspective. So I think we'll continue that process.
Janet, Mary probably aware of this, but you may not be, Tony, because you had the town council public first tomorrow, is it? The town council
Yes,
Right.
tomorrow is the public hearing and.
public hearing, they
And then the
vote next week, so under the town charter, the town council, correct me if I say something wrong, can only reduce the budget, but on budget items, they cannot increase line items, or the total budget for that, so that's their.
And
Right.
also just to, I think Brian alluded to it, Board of Ed budget on across the board is one number. So anytime there's a reduction or a change in the Board of Ed budget, that line item and the determination, with the exception of the capital items, goes back to the Board of Ed. So none of the town agencies per se have anything, I don't want to say we don't have a say, but they are not responsible for making those cuts or making those determinations. And I think a lot of times people don't understand that.
Line item decision.
Right.
That's right. It was all Board of Ed.
And you've had to deal with that in recent years. Town councils made cuts, you've got to figure out what you're gonna do. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And you should know that the
Yeah.
Board of Selectmen has no oversight on the operating budget for the Board of Education. We only have oversight on the capital budget. So it's the Board of Finance and the Town Council who have input into the operating budget. I mean, we can comment, but we don't get to do anything.
All right, all very
And
confusing.
just one last thing, just
Yes.
because of the public hearing tomorrow,
Right.
is at 5 p.m., which is an unusual time.
Oh, yeah.
Given the holiday weekend. 5 p.m. tomorrow.
In case you didn't know. Okay, And Josh, anything else you want to
No,
say?
the public hearing tomorrow, 5 p.m. And that's it.
Well, thank you
Next week,
all
yeah.
for your good work. I mean, this is a kind of
Thank you.
almost 6 months journey from when the departments start, we get to tomorrow night and then finalize the budget and the mill rate. So let's talk about bonding now because it's related. So Andrew, probably you want to come in now. We've issued some bonds, just as I understand it, quite successfully in talking just about 2024. So if you could talk about, year to date and then plans, forecasts for the rest of the year. I guess you're there somewhere, Andrew. Thank you. Good.
Hi, yes, I'm here. And happy for Anne or Deanna to chime in, but we just did our bond issue earlier this month. I believe the grand total we are receiving is around 29 million and change.
Sorry, could you just repeat the number?
29.
29 million. And
With the premium. Yeah, with premium.
right. So 2 million of that was premium that we received. And 20 million of that 29 million is actually a reimbursement to the general fund because we essentially, and this has been a longstanding practice of the town, is we will pay from our general fund, capital project expenses on the front end, and then we go out to bond and then we reimburse ourselves following the bond issue. And that way we're able to ensure that we're not over bonding, we're really bonding to what our actual expenses are, and then we reimburse ourselves. So I just wanted to point that out, that $20 million was simply a reimbursement. And when we go out to bond next year, it's going to be a similar situation where some money will already be spent on the New Canaan Police Station renovation, and then we're going to reimburse ourselves again. But it was a successful issue. Deanna and I approved the lowest bid. I believe the true interest cost was 3.2%, which if you think about it, we're now, now that we've reimbursed ourselves 20 million.
0.68.
I'm sorry?
Nope.
Oh, but the nice, situation we have in terms of interest rates, that the town is earning in our money market accounts and our treasuries over 5%. So we were able to issue debt at a much lower rate than what we're earning on our cash. And this is kind of a unique point, in the 11 years I've been doing this, we've never been in that situation where our interest earnings on our cash are exceeding the debt, interest that we owe. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, but happy for Anne or Deanna to also chime in on the latest bond issue process.
So as Andrew said, it was 29 million, 27 to go to the projects, 2.1 million for the premium. Robert Bard was the winning bid. We
Baird,
had
yeah.
a historic Baird, thank you. We had a historic number of bids, I believe 18 bids. So our financial advisor was quite surprised with the number. Not surprised that we wouldn't get it, but just he hasn't seen that level come in. So that was very good. After this bond issuance, we'll do another one next year. We have about another $43 million worth of approved projects right now that are still to be bonded. And as you can imagine, the police station is the largest one, 27.5. We have the Playhouse, police station. It's like 6 main projects. Board of Ed has boilers and things like that make up the bulk of that 43. I put a schedule in there just for an FYI so you can see the actual bonded debt through 2044. I wish it was 24. And then to see the year over year change. What we do is we try to stagger that from we look at it from a budgetary perspective as well as what of our bonding needs. And part of that, the 2 million we got in premium, the 2.1, as Josh was talking about the different cuts along the way in the Board of Finance, that 2.1 came into play. with, because it can go against interest expense that you already have on debt. So that was why that number was large. And we literally closed the morning of the Board of Ed's, the Board of Finance's meeting, so they could incorporate that number into it. Then what you also have is a summary page for the 5-year capital plan to tell you right now, what's in front of the Board of Finance Town Council that they're going to be doing authorizations on for fiscal year 25, and then what's estimated going out by department. And we take that into consideration when you talk about different, the bonding forecasts. We base it on when do we think the project's going to be complete, because we do it in arrears. We bond in arrears. So once they're approved, we then talk to DPW, Board of Ed. We see when do we think, and every year we now go out to the departments to say, are these projects closed? Are they done? And if there's residual, as Dr. Alexei had talked about, if there was residual bonding left over for some reason, we reassign it to an authorized but not bonded project. So to keep it down. So we closed out between the two departments, we closed out about 353 projects last year, cleaned it all up. And we have projects in different, we have tax supported projects that we look at, and we look at bonded projects as well.
Amazing. 353 they cleaned up. That's
Yeah,
great.
for the transparency, we put it in front of the board to say, these are the projects we're closing down. And if we had residual money, some of the projects, because of the dollar amounts,
Yeah.
you want to front some of it up, because you
Right.
can't pull it all away from
Right.
the general fund.
Right.
So if there's ones like that,
Yeah.
we
But
just
that's great.
reassign it.
Because I know in the past, it hasn't been quite that efficient.
We're getting, no, we work at where, I know Sean's on his side, DPW and police, and that they're
That's
working
great.
through the projects right now so that we have a more streamlined turn over that money quicker if we have residual.
That's
And
great.
you'll see in the monthly financials, we now started including a chart on our older, basically on capital, but
Yep.
with a major focus on closing out the older capital. So capital, right now, we're looking at anything that's aged older than 22. That we're trying to, complete the projects and then give whatever residual money back to the town.
That's great.
Big focus.
So, further questions on the bonding? Tony?
No.
Janet, anything?
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, I have, I was tempted to ask when you talked about interest rates, why we didn't just raise 100 million and put the rest in the bank and, you know.
You're not gonna get 5% for the next long term.
That's not the.
I'm pretty sure that's not legal.
That's not the question. It's not for me to do, it's just going through my head. Question is, our AAA rating is safe, is it?
Yes, so we had our rating again through Moody's, and they reaffirmed our AAA rating. I think the one thing, the one main takeaway that was different from prior years of doing this is they did provide more prescriptive guidance on what our fund balance levels need to be in order to maintain that AAA rating in the for future issues. So I think that definitely needs to be factored in as the Board of Finance sets the mill rate, that we don't draw down from our fund balance too much, because we want to obviously maintain that AAA rating and access better rates and bids through having that rating. So I think that is an important call out. Most issuers in other parts of the country have much larger fund balances. In Connecticut, they do tend to be lower, simply because the towns have authority, taxing authority, so they're able to better closely manage their budgets and raise revenue. And especially in New Canaan, where we have a 99.5% or higher tax collection rate for the last 20 plus years, we're able to show Moody's that we've never had an issue on that front. But I think because we've drawn down our fund balance a bit in order to pay some of these capital projects on the front end. And then we also did the library line of credit. So our fund balances were a little bit lower this year than they were when we've gone out to get rated in prior years. So that was something that Moody's came back to us on, but again, reaffirmed our AAA rating.
Thanks.
I just wanted to add so Moody's changed in 2022, their process. So Connecticut's the outlier in terms of how they rate entities. And the whole of Connecticut is the outlier in terms of, as Andrew said, because we're dependent on property taxes.
Yeah.
So they do adjustments for Connecticut at the end out of their matrix. What they do now is when they changed it, they don't just look at your general fund balance anymore. They look across everything, including proprietary, enterprise, all your special revenues. So where that comes into play, as Andrew mentioned, it hurts us not hurts us. We do it in arrears, which I think is appropriate because we don't want to bond for money that sits around, worry about arbitrage, different things. We didn't bond last year. So our capital had a negative in that capital fund because we spent more than we drew in because we had the general fund. So now that they bundle all those funds together, that negative's coming into play. So they just rechange it at the end. So that happens throughout a lot of Connecticut, the way we do our taxing. We stay true to our fund balance policy. We don't go below it. We don't do anything. We stay true to it. But it's just Moody's matrix. That's what it is.
Okay. Andrew you mentioned the library line of credit. What is the balance outstanding?
So we just got $1 million in.
Sorry,
We had a $4 million loan with them right now. That sits in our capital fund. Again, it's another one where there's 4 million drawn. We just got $1 million from them. Was it last week? I think it came in. We got $1 million payoff.
Brought it down
To three right
three.
now. Yeah,
Okay.
we were 4. It's down to 3. They believe by probably September, I think, and I hope I'm not quoting that. Was that what they said of September? That they may bring it down again. And we charge interest on it, and it's reset every January. We reset the interest rate so that it's not, obviously if the interest rate is high, we reset it so that they get the same rate that we would.
Sorry, I asked a question. You may not know what this is about. Do you need any further explanation?
No.
You want to just, it was you do it, and it was a 10.
Well,
10
yeah,
million
originally it was
facility,
10,
wasn't it?
and then it was, do we bond? Do we do cash? But when it stepped coming down, we didn't want to bond for something that basically the library could pay off in 3-4 years, and we're left with bonds over 10 years. So the cash made the most sense for us to do, and in terms of charging them an interest rate, so the town is getting interest on that money. So, and they have, I believe it's till 2032, is it 32? That they have to pay back, but they believe that's going to happen a lot sooner because the donations are coming in. And we get their pledge agreements to show the pledges that are against that. And we now, as of February, their account where their pledge comes in, the town has the control to sweep that account to pull the money in when the pledges come.
Yeah, and basically the private side of the funding for the library is a lot of it was in multi-year pledges to be played over multiple years, so that the town was to fund against those pledges, and as the pledges come in, they pay it down. It's down to 3 million, which is pretty good. Yeah. So I think that's it on the item 3, the budget. Just by way of background, colleagues, the reason we dive into this is simply because the budgeting process is one of the most important financial controls we have to set the budget and then monitor, as we do every meeting, expenditure against budget, both on the capital and operating side. So from our point of view, that's why we do it. It's a very important financial control over our finances. So let's go to item 4, discussion of process and timing to review the proposals for the independent financial statement audit as well as the internal audit. So, okay, so in the last week, I think it was, we've all got the proposals, right? Some time ago. And maybe last week it was, I think, Anne sent us an analysis of the 2 proposals received from the 2 for the audit of our financial statements, one from our incumbent auditor PKF, and the other one from from CLA.
CLI.
CLA.
Yeah.
Used to be Blumshire. Only 2 received.
Yep.
And then on the internal audit side, I think there are 6. Other people here. We've got Diane, an analysis of them. So under the town charter, the appointments are made by an ad hoc committee which comprises the first selectman, chairman of the town council, and the 4 of us, right? That one ad hoc committee to do that. So it's not to discuss today the merits of the proposals, more to discuss the you understand the process and to discuss the I guess there's two things we have to decide as an ad hoc committee. Who are we going to interview? I think it's a no-brainer for the audit. We discuss there's 2 we're going to interview both. I don't think we want to interview 6 firms. It's too many, and some of them are ill qualified. So there's that, and then there's the timing. And you sent an email about, when are people available, it might work our while. I didn't reply, so we're all, after we adjourn the meeting, if we could just take a few minutes to see, when we might, as we're all here.
Step out, we are interviewing legal candidates.
And we met them because Tony and I were in the wrong room.
So we can't do that unless we're doing it immediately. I mean, to circle back with you.
That's
after
fine.
This meeting.
Well, look, we can, we'll talk and then we'll match it with your calendar, no problem. So why don't you just tell us about because, I guess, I was here last year when we sort of started down this path, but the other 3 members were not. So just how you went about this and got to the point where we are now on both sides, yeah.
Well, I'll talk to the process and then Diane can talk if you need any more details. We issued out the RFP so that we get the replies back in March. We got the 2 that came in. At the same time, we did the internal as well. And as you can tell, we got the 6 coming in. I would say we're actually quite lucky to have gotten 2 for our external. Our surrounding towns only got their incumbents. So we actually, the fact that we got 2 people, our incumbent and an additional firm on it.
And where do you post the RFP, or how is it?
So it goes on our website, and we also post it in a bigger newspaper. So we hit larger because you can tell from our internal, we got California, Rhode Island, Florida. So it did reach. So they go out and put those words out there that they look online and, to try and find those type of looking for. But we did put it both online and in the paper. And we kept on top. We gave a question and answer time for them as well. Those questions where we let them know it would be posted on our website as well. Follow anybody who had a question, we answered so everybody could see on that process.
A lot of towns in Connecticut have just been getting only their incumbent responding, haven't they? So,
Right.
Yeah.
It's a small community
Yeah.
of auditors in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the accounting firms are driving toward consulting.
Mhm.
That's probably why.
Yeah.
And these 2, I think, are probably the biggest in this.
Probably because
state.
CLA was Bloom Shapiro,
Yeah.
and they did have a lot
They
in the
did.
state before they were purchased out.
And just anecdotal, I think these 2 firms probably audit more municipalities in this state than anyone else. So they both have plenty of experience.
And just
doing this.
background on audit timelines, there was, how many we said, 49 towns filed by the normal deadline of December 31st last year. Out of the
49
169.
Right.
They struggled, so many struggled to get it between staff with the firms and staff with their own internal staff. There's we see a lot of job openings,
Lot
so
of turnover.
a lot of turnover, so 49 filed on time. We were one of the 49. We will continue to be one of the 49,
Yeah,
so.
that's good. Okay, Dan, you want to? talk?
No, just the summary was just more of an attempt to give you a tool to quickly look at them, particularly on the internal audit side. Because are not all apples to apples. It's a little harder to compare, but I think with the professional audit services, that should take priority just because we're gonna need to get somebody on board.
The complication is one of the firms is both
Yeah.
internal and
external,
external, and one of the
correct.
better candidates for internal.
Right.
to my mind.
So,
Right.
I mean, my thinking is, Tiana, we probably, you know, actually on the same day, but we probably want to try and do, don't think we want to do six firms, obviously, there's some in
I-
California.
Yeah, California. the
So
added
we,
cost.
we got to decide, is it two or is it three for the internal audit side? We probably want to find the same week, because there is a priority to appoint an auditor.
Mhm.
As you say, there's this complication, and we have it CLA, I mean,
In CLA, there were two different partners or groups.
They're treated
Yeah.
completely different groups.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
but-
the internal don't have the same level of, not level of staff, their direction and their credentials are completely different
different
than
people.
the.
It's
than
a
the
question of
auditing
whether
firm.
you get from the external
But-
audit.
Oh, yeah,
have
you don't wanna have the same
independence and all
company,
the rest
right,
of it, yeah.
exactly.
we don't, I mean,
Yes.
I don't know if you're breaking any laws, but from an. we
Separation.
Disagree, but from an independent standpoint, internal audit is sort of an extension of a management function, and having your audit
Right.
firm, as different people.
Right.
Doing internal audit
Mhm.
work,
And it's
I
the
mean, certainly in
appearance
the
of
public-
independence too.
Right.
Mhm.
public company sector is, was outlawed under Sarbanes-Oxley. So, I mean, certainly best practice would be, I mean, in the past, PKF have done the odd project for us here and there, very few, but, yeah, if we're going to work with CLA, it's, we need to decide, which is it. So we probably
Okay.
want to put these two, sets of interviews finalized close to.
In the same time period, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once
Not
we have your
necessarily the
schedule,
same
we
day,
can,
but,
and who it
same-
is.
Probably same week, so we can move ahead.
okay.
But let's talk offline after we're done about timelines, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on that? I don't think so. Is there any other questions? All right, so we're now going to move to the February, we've got the February reports. They were, I don't know what's in the notes here, but what's your name? Roberto sent them to us.
They were sent the day after.
Yeah, and I checked with her because she's got a distribution email. I don't know who's on it. I checked with her. Did it include the three of them? It did. So you've all got it. Thank you, Diana. And then you got from Diane as well, the town side. So do what you, in whatever order you like, what you normally do, which is just walk us through, we've got them in advance, so the highlights as to. Are you going first?
We'll do the towns. I want to be able to support Josh before we head out to that, with that 9:30 meeting today.
I'll get through it in
Conference room down the end?
5 minutes. So you have the long.
I mean, we
form-
look as though we're doing okay, so 5 minutes is probably.
So you have the long form version, which is this,
Yeah.
yeah, and the short form version, the highlights, which is this. So I'll just quickly go through the highlights right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is through the end of February, so it's a little early to really do predictions out to where we'll be in 3 months at the end of June. So right now we're at, on the revenue side of things, 99.1% of what was budgeted for this year. The majority of that obviously is tax collections. Tax collections are at 100% right now for the year. As you know, we budget a 98.5% collection rate, and we usually have about $1.5 million or more that we anticipate to get beyond that. Right now, we have about 100,000 beyond that, and 800,000 beyond that, and over the next couple of months, we'll kind of see where that ends up. Below that, we have building permits. Right now, we're kind of in a low season of building permits. They start to come back as the spring goes on, to see what happens with the market. We're anticipating to outpace what we had budgeted, which was 850. Right now, we're at about 633,000, 74%. So we think that'll definitely hit 850, but likely go beyond that as well. Conveyance fees, we're obviously seeing that sloping back towards the norm of pre-COVID numbers, where it spiked in the middle of COVID. But we're anticipating hitting likely the 1.5 million that was budgeted. We're about 70% of that right now. Obviously, it's trailing a little bit from last year, but we kind of anticipate that as it's sloping back. I think last year we outperformed what we had budgeted then by more. We're probably going to get closer to hitting the mark this year. Parking is also parking's at about 70%. Most of that is on the permitting side, as people kind of slowly go back to work. Obviously, permits are kind of slowly catching up. Things like day passes, meters, those are all hitting on target for budget. The permits are slacking behind a little bit. Tickets are lower because we're ticketing less and educating more, which is good. But we anticipate that'll either come close or hit budget. Interest on investments obviously has been the outlier this year. It was 900,000 budgeted. Right now we're at a little over 1 million. So obviously that's going to outperform, and we'll see how that does in the next 3 months. I don't know if we have a real number of where we're guessing that's going to end up. That's pretty much where we are on the revenue side of things. Any questions on those? I know that was quick, but on the expenditure side of things, we always kind of anticipate that we're going to hit slightly below or at the budgeted number. Right now, we're at 58% of what was budgeted. We have an anticipated savings on the debt service side because we didn't go out to bid last year. So the newly bidded debt service is going to hit next year. So we'll have about 600,000 savings on that. But we're having new SRO officers that's offsetting some of that on the expenditure side. So we kind of have to see how that balances out as the year goes on. Any questions on that?
So bottom line on the expenditure side, your best guesses will come in.
Definitely on
Close to
budget.
budget?
Definitely on budget. Wait, yeah,
Yes.
there's no ifs or buts on that. So it's
Okay.
definitely
Good,
on
good,
budget.
good.
It's just
Yeah.
what's that savings going to be?
Yeah.
Like Josh said, we have about 600 in debt service. It depends if anything comes up right now that needs that. With the SRO, which is the school resource officers, so 3 of them, they were not budgeted. When they were approved, they were not in the budget from last year. So we're covering them now, but we're only covering for what, 4 months?
4 months or
4
so, yeah.
months. So that's something contingency can support. We have a contingency of 400,000.
They've all been hired, haven't
What-
they? Yeah.
What is the Board of Education excess cost grant? What is that?
There's 2 different types of grants that come in. There's the excess cost and there's the education cost.
Cost
sharing.
sharing, yeah. Yes.
So there's the one, town gets both, but it's related to Board of Ed, and I'll let you explain it. And it's, one is there's set payment patterns that we get in 3 times a year, 3 times. And then the other one is based on the Board of Ed's applying for their excess costs. So I'll let you explain that one, the 9.5 times of it.
Go ahead, you start.
I do have to run out for that 9:30. Josh and you're in good hands with Josh and
Josh,
Diane.
we're done. If you-
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's
Diane can stay fine for any of the timelines or anything. I want to make sure that's covered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the excess cost grant is special ed related. And it's based on, basically, it starts with what our cost per pupil is. And if we exceed 4.5 times our cost per pupil, we get a payment related to,
This coming from the state or where's it
coming from the state.
State.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of the way it works. So to the extent that we exceed 4.5 times our cost per pupil, we get a
grant from the state? Okay.
and it comes to the town. And the current agreement is if we do exceed our budget, because of special ed related expenses, we can apply to have some of that money moved over to the board to
Okay.
cover it.
Thank you.
We don't do it very often, but if we need it, it's great to have that,
And the timing on that.
the timing of when we would do that.
When
When do we
you
get the grant?
apply and when you
Oh.
get the funds, because
We
that's
get,
important
we
that they
get we
understand
get a
that.
portion of it. I believe it's in February.
But you applied basis the information on,
It's typically done in the fall of the prior year.
right.
Right, so but it is a same year reimbursement. right? So the idea is that it's for students that it costs, again, 4.5 times, and we're
Right.
eligible for reimbursement above that 4.5 times. And it's a percentage of that. It vacillates between 68 and 72% of that band, whatever it is, above 4.5 times and up. The idea is so that budgets don't get overwhelmed by
By special ed,
out-of-district
yeah.
placements or other high cost needs of special education. But they do it in the same budget year, which is important. Sean mentioned many districts net out their budget, so they anticipate what they would receive and then bring down their budget by that amount. We've agreed, and it's worked quite well for us, that we gross up our budget. So we budget for what we expect the full expenditure to be. And then the excess cost is booked by the town. And then by statute, actually, it can be used if there are cost overruns, the out of district placements, which helps us from getting into a position where many districts find themselves where a few very high cost students cause the rest of the budget to be frozen and be sort of not invested in the things it was intended for.
Okay, thanks.
So the cost per student, roughly comes to, I think it's probably close to about $100,000. So to the extent that one student drives $100,000, and that could happen easily with an outplacement.
Right, and typically we have attracted a lot of those students, right? to the teams.
We've had some movements.
It's like Field of Dreams.
John, do you want to take us, or Brian? Yeah,
On
take us
February?
through
Yeah.
highlights on
So,
February. Yeah,
so we review monthly, we review it with the Board of Ed Resource Committee. Typically, it's the Friday before the second Board of Ed meeting. So we have
There's a subcommittee of the.
it's a subcommittee, it's Finance Committee.
Finance,
It's
same,
called
call
Board
it
of Ed
Resource
Resource
Committee,
Committee. It's essentially a Finance Committee.
Mhm.
So it gets reviewed with them and then goes to the full Board of Ed the following Monday at their second board meeting.
Right.
So basically the report is broken up into the following items, discussion of the operating fund. And within that, we also look at our budget attainment analysis as a chart separate on year-to-year budget attainment because our expenses are very cyclical. We compare year-to-year attainment. And that helps out to identify where potential areas where we're looking a little bit hotter than normal. We also review our grants year to date, school lunch program, donations, summer school, and recently we included a chart on capital, where we are in capital with major focus on closing out the older projects. And let me just add to that, why do we have some older projects? Board of Ed, typically we have a very short window on some of these projects. It needs, we can't have students in the building when the work is being done. So that, in the case of something like that, like a roofing project or something like that, typically takes 2 to 3 years. So we do have areas where that has happened. Boilers, elementary boilers, we're in the process of finishing 3 boiler projects in the elementary schools. We did budget some money for that a couple of years ago. It turned out it wasn't enough, given rising prices. So we did transfer some money from one of the projects to another, so that we can at least get one of those projects started. And then in the following budget cycle, we had to ask for more money to replace the older boilers with condensing boilers, which are much more energy efficient. So just very quickly, as of February, 8 months into the year, our operating fund is 58.8 million year to date, which is 57% of budget. So it's 1 point less than what the town is doing. The full year budget is 103. The total amount in addition that's encumbered is 40.3 million, or 39% of the budget. And these encumbrances are typically made up of salaries, benefits, property services, which includes utilities and maintenance contracts, purchase services such as outplace tuition and transportation, which are fairly predictable. And we know what the full year numbers are. And then the remaining balance as of February is 3.9 million, or about almost 4% of the budget. And then that's the first couple of pages of the package. On page 4 shows the year-to-year attainment analysis. Right now, we're at 57.1, as I mentioned earlier. And compared to last year, we're at 56.9. So we're 0.2 points higher than we were last year, but it's attributable to supplies and equipment, and typically those will, self-correct by the end of the year. And a month ago, we were 5.5 points higher, and now we're down to 0.2, so it is self-correcting. In school lunch, I'm sorry, in grants, we have total awarded grants of 2.6 million. And most of these are 2-year grants, with year-to-date expenditures of 870,000 and a remaining balance as of February of 1.7 million. And again, these are 2-year grants, so we don't have to spend it all. School lunch, we're doing really well. Our year-to-date revenue is 1.8 million through February, which is 60% of our full-year revenue budget, 2.7. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong number here. Revenue is 1.8 million, 60% of our full-year budget of 2.9. Our year-to-date expense is 1.6, or 57.6% of our full-year budget of 2.7. As a result, our net income is 217,000. So we're making money in
We'll
food
beat
services.
that.
It's, most districts lose money in food services. And as a result of that, they tend to go to outsourcing. We've been running a self-op for many years, and it's profitable and it's really successful. So we're at 217 to the good as of February, which is 93% of our profit plan. So I think we're going to, at this point, we can safely say we'll probably exceed our profit plan. Facilities, rental, donations in summer school, there's a chart on that on pages 13 to 14. Facility rental to date is 157,000. Year-to-date expenses are 176. So we've drawn down the fund balance a little bit to spend on unbudgeted expenses related to the dome project, small amount of money. Despite those investments, the fund balance still remains at a positive 220,000. Donations year-to-date are 664,000 through February, and includes a $350,000 donation we received on July 1st.
That's one donation, is it?
One donation related to the dome project. Right.
So, Brian, where are we with the project in terms of
We are,
completion?
we're complete.
Yeah.
We're complete. We are complete.
It is
Uh,
done, complete.
We're finishing up some recognition for those very generous donors that we have. And then we'll be having our grand opening end of April.
Okay.
And then our students are already using it. Our classes are in there, a couple of periods a day at least, if not more. And we're putting plans together to bring some elementary students up, hopefully by the end of the school year. So it is open and running, and it's spectacular.
Come and see it.
Please do.
Our next meeting there. Any questions on that? Okay, great. Yeah, that's hasn't got a lot of publicity, at least with Michael Dinan and the likes. I
It
mean,
hasn't.
but it's coming at the end of April, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you
We wanted to do a
Yeah.
softer opening to work out any kinks.
Yes,
And to make sure that our students got in there.
yeah,
So we're using it for classes every day now.
every day.
Classes.
Gosh, good.
So we're using it that way, and there's a learning curve. It's
Yeah.
a new technology.
Yeah,
So we've got a few folks who are spending time with the company, learning how to use it. And we are working with the Board of Education to put together a facilities use policy around it,
Yeah.
so that the community can take advantage of it as well.
good, good, good.
Very nice.
Sorry to interrupt.
I was pretty much done. The only thing I didn't
just-
cover.
We're on the
I
dome,
get to-
so.
I get to talk about the fun things.
Yeah. Yes.
The
So summer
last,
school.
last couple of things. So we have summer school revenue of 148. That number's been the same since the end of the summer last year, with expenses of 133, resulting in a small profit of 15,000. That, that revenue basically is summer enrichment. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, we put in at the last page, our current status of our open capital projects. And again, big focus is to close out the projects that are 22 or older. That's the report.
Any questions? No. Okay. Thanks very, very much. So any other matters anyone on the committee would like to raise? No? Can I have a motion for adjournment? Someone?
Are we gonna speak about dates for?
That's out of the meeting.
Okay.
We will. Opposed?
I'll
Okay.
move.
Okay. Any objections? Okay, we have vote to adjourn.
Don't move.
Thank you very much. It's